Imagine walking into a room knowing that the man sitting across from you, the man who looked you in the eyes and called you defective, broken, not enough, is about to watch everything he believed about you fall apart in a single moment. No warning, no dramatic speech, just the truth, quietly revealed at exactly the right time. Claire Bennett walked into that Manhattan law office on a cold November morning with her coat buttoned all the way up. She was calm, she was ready, and she was carrying a secret that was about to change every single calculation her soon-to-be ex-husband had made. He thought he had won. He thought he had replaced her. He thought he had left behind a woman too broken to build anything worth having. He had no idea. What happened in Conference Room 3 that morning was not revenge. It was not a performance. It was simply a woman who had survived 2 years of being dismantled, piece by piece, quietly, in the way that only the people closest to us know how to do, arriving at the final moment with her head high and her hands steady. And when the coat shifted and the truth became impossible to ignore, the most powerful man in the room had nothing left to say. This is Claire's story. It will make you angry. It will make you cry. And if you stay until the end, it will remind you of something you may have forgotten about yourself. Stay with me. Lesson statement. This story is not about a woman who got even. It is about a woman who got free and learned that those are two very different things. Content value line. Because sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is simply refuse to disappear. And this story shows you exactly what that looks like, one impossible day at a time. If this story moved you, if even one moment made you catch your breath or see something differently, do something small that matters. Hit the like button so more people find their way to stories like this one. Drop a comment below telling me which moment hit you hardest. I read every single one. Share this with one person in your life who needs to hear it today. And subscribe so you never miss a story. You showed up for Claire today. That means something.
The elevator doors opened on the 34th floor, and Claire Bennett stepped out into the kind of silence that only exists in expensive places. Law offices, hospital waiting rooms, the moment before a verdict. The reception area of Harrington and Associates, ironic, she had always thought that Daniel's family attorney shared his name, was decorated in shades of slate and cream. The furniture was the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The receptionist looked up with a professionally warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Claire had been in rooms like this her entire married life. She knew how to move through them. Chin level, shoulders back, coat buttoned. Her coat was buttoned all the way up today, for reasons that had nothing to do with the November cold outside. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. A text from Meg. "Are you sure about this? You look like you're about to defuse a bomb." Claire almost smiled. Meg couldn't see her. Meg was sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks away because Claire had told her not to come upstairs. But Meg had been sending texts with the energy of someone watching a tense sporting event from a safe distance. Claire typed back, "I am defusing a bomb. The bomb is my marriage." 3 dots appeared immediately. "Then blow it up, baby. Patterson and I are rooting for you." Patterson was Meg's cat. He was deeply unimpressed by human suffering and had been sitting on Claire's legal documents for the past 3 months. She found his presence oddly comforting. She put her phone away and walked to the receptionist's desk. "Claire Bennett," she said, "I have a 10 o'clock. The receptionist checked her screen. "Of course, Ms. Bennett. Conference room 3. Second door on your right. Mr. Harrington is already here." Of course he was. Daniel was always early to things that mattered to him. And this, the final, official, legally binding end of their 4-year marriage, mattered to Daniel Harrington more than he would ever admit out loud, because it meant he could move forward, move on, replace what he had decided was defective with something he believed was better. Claire walked down the corridor. Her heels were quiet on the carpet. The walls held framed photographs of the Manhattan skyline at various times of day. Dawn, Dusk, the blue hour, she had designed the interior of an office like this once, early in her career, before she became Daniel Harrington's wife and slowly, carefully, stopped being Claire Bennett, the designer, and became simply Claire Harrington, the woman who couldn't give her husband what he needed. She stopped outside conference room 3. She put one hand, briefly, against her abdomen. 8 months. She was 8 months pregnant, and the baby had been kicking since 6 in the morning with the confident energy of someone who had absolutely no idea what kind of day this was. "I know," Claire whispered to her. "I know. We're almost through it." She opened the door. Daniel was seated at the far end of a long mahogany table, flanked by 2 attorneys in matching navy suits. He was 40 years old and looked like money. The kind of money that came with good genetics and excellent tailoring. His hair was dark and perfectly cut. His eyes, when they found her, were the careful gray of someone who had prepared for this meeting and was confident in his preparation. That confidence lasted approximately 4 seconds, because Claire walked in and she did not look broken. She did not look diminished. She did not look like the woman he had left crying in their kitchen 14 months ago, sliding down the cabinet to the floor because the weight of his words had made it impossible to stand. She looked like herself, which was somehow worse for him. She could see it in the way his expression recalibrated. "Claire," he said. His voice was even, measured. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," she said, and took her seat across from him. Rebecca Shaw, Claire's attorney, was already seated to her left. Rebecca was 52 years old, had been practicing family law for 25 years, and had the specific energy of a woman who had seen every version of this story and remained perpetually unimpressed by men like Daniel Harrington. She gave Claire a small, steady nod. The meeting began. Documents, terms, the language of ending things legally, equitable distribution, asset valuation, the Connecticut property, the investment accounts. Daniel had been surprisingly cooperative in the months of negotiation, Rebecca had noted, which meant he was eager to finish this, eager to begin whatever came next. Claire already knew what came next for him. Everyone did. Tiffany Crane, 25 years old, lifestyle influencer, 400,000 Instagram followers, currently wearing Daniel's future on her finger in the form of an engagement ring he'd purchased 3 weeks after their divorce filing was submitted. She watched Daniel's attorneys slide papers across the table. She watched Daniel review them with the practiced calm of a man who handled large transactions regularly and considered this one of them. She thought about the kitchen floor. She thought about the February night 2 years ago when the third IVF cycle failed and Daniel had come home from a business dinner and looked at her, sitting at the island with the paperwork, and said words that she had replayed in her mind approximately 10,000 times since. She thought about what she was carrying under this coat. The final document reached her side of the table. Rebecca placed it in front of her. Claire picked up the pen, and as she leaned forward to sign, the coat shifted. The fabric that she had buttoned carefully, arranged precisely, planned to keep between herself and this moment for just a little while longer, moved. The silence in conference room 3 changed quality. Daniel's lead attorney stopped speaking mid-sentence. Daniel himself went very still. Claire straightened slowly and set down the pen. She did not look away from Daniel's face as she let the coat fall open slightly. She did not perform the moment. She simply let it exist. 8 months of secret. 8 months of building a new life in the margins of the old one ending. 8 months of choosing when to use the truth and how and whether it would matter. Daniel's voice came out wrong, not his boardroom voice, something underneath it, raw and unrecognizable. How long? 8 months, Claire said. Her voice was steady. It surprised even her. She kicks in the mornings, mostly. She seems to like jazz, which I find embarrassing. The room did not breathe. Rebecca, to her credit, simply folded her hands on the table and waited. She? Daniel said. Her name is Nora, Claire said. And before you say anything else, yes, she's yours. The math is simple. Now, shall we finish what we came here to do? She picked up the pen again. Her hand did not shake. 4 years earlier, the Hartford Children's Hospital Gala was held every October at the Lionsgate Hotel in downtown Greenwich, and Claire Bennett attended because her design firm had donated the centerpieces. 72 arrangements of white dahlias and eucalyptus that had taken her and her assistant 4 hours to complete that afternoon. She was 30 years old. Her firm, Bennett and Bennett Interiors, was 3 years old and doing well enough that she had just hired her second full-time employee. She was wearing a deep green dress that she had bought at a sample sale and altered herself, and her hair was loose, and she was standing near the bar calculating how early she could leave without it seeming rude when Daniel Harrington walked up beside her and ordered a sparkling water. You did the centerpieces, he said. She looked at him. I did. They're the best thing in the room. He glanced around at the glittering, well-dressed crowd. Don't tell anyone I said that. I'm on the committee. She laughed. It was genuine. That was the first thing she should have paid attention to. How easily he made her laugh in the very first moment. How skilled he was at it. How natural it seemed. His name was Daniel Harrington. He was the third generation of a Connecticut real estate family, ran the development arm of the company, and had just signed a check for $50,000 to the Children's Hospital with the ease of someone paying a parking ticket. Later, after she had married him and then left him, Meg would remind her of what she had said at the time. You told me, Meg said. Sitting across from Claire at her kitchen table, over coffee, 2 weeks after Claire moved into Meg's second bedroom, you told me that night that he felt like a safe place. You said that's what scared you, that it felt too easy. I know, Claire said. You were right to be scared, Meg said. Not unkindly, just honestly. A man who feels like a safe place in the first 5 minutes either genuinely is, or he's been practicing. Daniel had been practicing. The first year was beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when you don't yet know what they cost. He was attentive and generous, and genuinely interested in her work, or performed interest so well that she couldn't tell the difference. He came to her design presentations. He remembered the names of her clients. He told her she was extraordinary with a conviction that made her feel, for the first time in a long time, seen. He proposed at the restaurant where they'd had their first dinner. No audience, no flash mob, just the two of them and a ring he'd had designed specifically, not purchased off a shelf, which felt significant. She said yes while crying, which she found embarrassing, and he laughed and told her she was beautiful when she cried, which she found less embarrassing than she should have. They were married in May, small ceremony, Meg as maid of honor, wearing a dress she described as aggressively coral. And for 1 solid year, Claire was happy in the simple, uncomplicated way that feels permanent when you're inside it. Then came the hotel contract. 18 months into their marriage, a boutique hotel group called Meridian Properties approached Bennett Interiors about redesigning their flagship locations. 3 properties, significant scope, the kind of contract that would have tripled her firm's profile and allowed her to hire 2 more designers and begin pitching national accounts. It would require travel. Chicago, San Francisco, London, for one of the properties. She told Daniel over dinner. She was excited. She could feel the excitement in her own voice, the way it lifted when she described what the project could mean. Daniel listened. His face did not change. "Why do you need to travel for work?" he said. "I give you everything you need right here." The sentence landed quietly. She almost missed it, almost argued past it. Instead, she heard it. But she did not yet understand what she was hearing. She thought it was love. She thought it was a man who wanted his wife nearby because he valued her presence. She thought this was a communication issue, easily resolved. She turned down the contract. Looking back, she could see the shape of the next 2 years in that single decision, the way Daniel registered that she would yield, the way the requests that followed, smaller, subtler, dressed in the language of preference and partnership, were actually tests of the same principle. Would she yield? She always did. Her client list shrank, her hours in the office shortened, her second employee left for another firm when it became clear the workload was dwindling, and Claire told herself she was simplifying, focusing, choosing her marriage. What she was actually doing was disappearing. By the time the fertility treatments began, Bennett Interiors existed mostly in name. Claire existed mostly as an extension of Daniel's life, present at his events, appropriate at his dinners, careful in his presence, and increasingly invisible everywhere else. The fertility specialist appointments started. 12 months of trying, then the referrals, then the blood work, then the first IVF cycle. Daniel came to the early appointments with the performance of a concerned husband. He held her hand. He asked the doctors questions. He posted nothing about it on social media because they were keeping it private, which was the right call, but which also meant that Claire carried the weight of each failure in a kind of enforced silence. After the second failed cycle, he stopped coming to appointments. After the third, he stopped asking. By February of the third year, the night he came home to find her sitting at the kitchen island with the paperwork from the failed round, she already knew something had shifted. She just didn't know yet how permanently. He stood behind her and read the results over her shoulder. She felt him register the failure. She felt him decide something. He poured himself a scotch. He set it down very carefully. "Claire," he said. "I know," she said. "We can try again. Dr. Morrison said there is nothing reasonable about 2 years of this. Daniel, I need a wife who can give me a family." His voice was flat, precise. The voice he used in business negotiations when he wanted the other party to understand that the discussion was over. That's not a preference. That's a requirement, and you cannot meet it. She opened her mouth. "I'm going to bed," he said. He picked up his scotch. He left the room. Claire sat at the kitchen island for a long time. Then she slid off the bar stool onto the floor, put her back against the cabinet, and cried so hard that she lost track of time entirely. That was the night she understood that her marriage was already over. Not the night she filed for divorce, not the night she found the receipt, not the night she moved out. That February night on the kitchen floor was the real ending. Everything after was just paperwork. Claire found the receipt on a Tuesday in April, and the strange thing was that she almost didn't find it at all. She was taking Daniel's winter coat to the dry cleaner, one of those small domestic tasks she still performed automatically, out of habit, out of whatever was left of the instinct to maintain the household. And she put her hand in the left pocket to check for anything left behind. The receipt was from Aurelius Restaurant, one of the best in the city. Table for two, Valentine's Day. They had spent Valentine's Day apart. Daniel had said he had a client dinner. She had spent the evening watching a documentary about interior, architecture, and eating takeout Thai food, and feeling grateful for the quiet. She stood in the front hallway of their Greenwich house with the coat in one hand and the receipt in the other for approximately 30 seconds. Then she put both down, went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed, called Meg. "He was at Aurelius on Valentine's Day," she said when Meg picked up. "There's a receipt. Table for two." A pause. "Where are you right now?" Meg said. "Bedroom. Is he home?" "No, he's at the office." "Okay." Meg's voice shifted into what Claire privately thought of as Meg's operations mode, the calm, focused, slightly terrifying version of her best friend that emerged during genuine emergencies. First, breathe. Second, do not go through his phone while you're emotional. You'll do something that tips him off. Third, I'm coming over and I'm bringing wine and we are planning. Meg, Claire, trust me. I've been waiting to use my emergency divorce kit since his mother called you adequate at Thanksgiving. You have an emergency divorce kit? I have had an emergency divorce kit since approximately 6 months into your marriage. Don't look at me like that. I'm not looking at you. You're on the phone. I can feel you looking at me. I'll be there in 40 minutes. Meg arrived in 35, with wine, with a tote bag that did in fact have the words emergency kit written on it in Meg's handwriting, and with the contained energy of someone who had been quietly preparing for this conversation and was relieved it had finally arrived. They sat at Claire's kitchen table, the same table where Claire had sat through Daniel's dinners, Daniel's clients, Daniel's mother's visits. It felt different with just the two of them. "Here's what we do," Meg said, pouring wine into Claire's glass and water into her own because Meg was driving. "We find out what we're actually dealing with before we do anything else." "How?" "Private investigator, Rebecca Shaw." "You know Rebecca. My cousin used her for her divorce." "She has someone she uses. Retired cop. Very discreet. Not cheap, but you have your own accounts still, right? Daniel never consolidated everything?" "He tried to. I didn't agree to it." Claire had been quietly grateful for that stubbornness ever since. "I kept my business accounts separate." "Good. Smart." That was instinct, and it was correct. The investigator's name was Walt Garrison. He was 61 years old, had the energy of someone's deeply disappointed uncle, charged $200 a day, and operated with the enthusiasm of a man who had seen everything at least twice and was no longer surprised by any of it. He confirmed everything within 8 days. Daniel and a woman named Tiffany Crane had been together for 11 months. They had dinner at Aurelius on Valentine's Day. They had spent a weekend in the Berkshires in March. Tiffany was 25, had 400,000 Instagram followers, and documented her life in a style that could be described as aspirational with a wellness angle. Walt delivered his report on a Thursday evening, sitting across from Claire and Meg at a coffee shop near Rebecca's office, with the straightforward manner of someone describing weather patterns. "She seems like a decent enough person, actually," Walt said, with the tone of someone for whom this observation was neither here nor there. "Doesn't appear to know you exist, which is common. They usually don't." Then he slid one more page across the table. "There's this," he said. Claire read it. Her coffee went cold while she read it. "He consulted a divorce attorney," she said, 4 months ago. His family attorney initially, then a specialist. Walt tapped the page. "That's documentation of the consultation obtained through a source I won't name. He was planning to file. He just hadn't yet." Meg, to her credit, did not say anything immediately. She waited. "He was planning to leave before I even knew about her," Claire said slowly. "Before you knew?" "Yes. He let me go through the last IVF round, knowing he was already planning to—" She stopped. The IVF round. The injections 3 times a day, the monitoring appointments, the hope she had carefully tended and the devastation when it failed. And Daniel had stood in that doctor's office and held her hand and asked the right questions, already knowing he was leaving, already consulting attorneys. "Claire?" Meg said softly. "I'm okay," Claire said. She was not okay, but she would be. She could feel the difference now between those two things, which was itself a kind of progress. "We call Rebecca," Meg said. "We call Rebecca," Claire agreed. Rebecca Shaw had been practicing family law for 25 years and had the specific manner of a woman who had heard every version of the story and remained focused entirely on what could be done rather than what had already happened. She reviewed Walt's documentation with the careful attention of someone reading a contract rather than the evidence of a betrayal, which Claire found oddly comforting. "The early attorney consultation is interesting," Rebecca said. "It means he has been strategically positioned longer than you have. We catch up by moving deliberately. When do you want to file?" "Now," Claire said. "Good." Rebecca clicked her pen. "Let's talk about the house." 2 weeks later, Claire moved out of the Greenwich house and into Meg's second bedroom. The room was small and had a window that faced a brick wall and contained, when she arrived, 3 boxes of Meg's off-season clothes and a cat named Patterson, who regarded Claire's arrival with deep suspicion. Patterson was gray, enormous, and had the specific energy of a cat who considered himself the primary resident of the apartment and viewed all other living beings as guests of uncertain reliability. He sat on Claire's suitcase the first night. "He does that to establish dominance," Meg explained from the doorway. "It's working," Claire said. Patterson sniffed her hand, then walked away. Meg said this was the best possible first interaction and that Claire should consider herself approved. Claire sat on the edge of the bed in the small room and looked at the brick wall through the window and thought, "This is where I am now. This is the floor I am building from." It was not a comfortable thought, but it was an honest one, and honest, she was learning, was worth more than comfortable. Her phone lit up on the bed beside her, a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Hi, this is Tiffany Crane. I think we need to talk. I'm sorry for reaching out like this. I understand if you don't want to, but I think there are things you should know." Claire stared at the screen for a long time. Then she put the phone face down on the bed and went to sleep. Some things could wait until morning. 3 weeks after moving into Meg's second bedroom, Claire woke at 6 in the morning with the specific clarity that sometimes comes before conscious thought catches up. Something felt different. She lay in the narrow bed in the small room with the brick wall view and tried to identify what her body was telling her. Patterson was asleep at her feet, which he had begun doing approximately 4 days in, presumably because she kept the room warmer than Meg did, and he was pragmatic about comfort. She got up quietly, went to the bathroom, took a pregnancy test she had purchased the previous week, in a moment of what she'd told herself was simply being responsible, stood with her back against the bathroom wall and looked at the result. Then she took 4 more tests. All of them had been in the same box she'd kept from the fertility treatment period, purchased in bulk, never used after the treatments stopped. 5 tests, lined up on the edge of the tub, all positive. She sat on the bathroom floor for 45 minutes. Patterson came in, investigated her with his nose, sneezed at the tests, and left. He had seen enough. Meg found her there, still sitting on the tile, still looking at the row of tests. Meg stood in the doorway in her pajamas for approximately 4 seconds. "Patterson," she said, without looking away from Claire. "Go to your room." Patterson, who had returned, left again. Meg sat down on the bathroom floor next to Claire and looked at the tests. "Okay," Meg said. "Okay," Claire said. "Do you know when?" "The last night, before I found the receipt. About 6 weeks ago." Claire did the math again, the same math she'd been doing for the past 45 minutes. He was he was different that night, attentive, careful, like he felt guilty about something. He probably did, Meg said quietly. They sat on the bathroom floor for a few more minutes. What do you want to do? Meg said finally. Not what are you going to do. What do you want to do? The distinction mattered. I want to have this baby, Claire said. The certainty of it surprised her. After 2 years of wanting this, and being told she couldn't, being told she was inadequate, being made to feel that her body was a broken thing, the certainty felt enormous. I want to have this baby, and I want to get through the divorce first, and I don't want Daniel to know yet. Meg nodded slowly. Rebecca needs to know. Rebecca will know, but not Daniel. Not yet. That's strategically sound, Meg said. Also emotionally completely understandable. She paused. Also, Patterson is going to know because he can sense these things, and he will tell no one because he is ethically consistent. Claire laughed. It surprised her. It was the first time she had laughed in what felt like a very long time, and it came out a little wrong, a little ragged, but it was real. Rebecca Shaw, when informed the following morning, was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "How far along?" "About 6 weeks." "And you want to proceed with the divorce before disclosing?" "Yes." "That's your right. The pregnancy does not legally obligate you to inform him during proceedings, though it will become relevant for settlement terms once disclosed." Rebecca paused. "When do you want to disclose?" "When I'm ready," Claire said, "and when the timing helps rather than hurts." "Good," Rebecca said. "Knowledge is leverage, but only when you control when you use it. Talk to me before you tell anyone else, including your emotions." Claire began wearing structured blazers, loose layers. She kept her existing prenatal appointments under her married name while asking to be addressed as Cortez, her mother's maiden name, in the waiting room. She found a new OB clinic on the Upper West Side after the second month when paranoia about being recognized in Greenwich became too significant to dismiss. The months of divorce negotiation moved forward with a steady pace of legal proceedings. Daniel was cooperative in the way of a man who had already decided on his next destination and wanted to clear the departure gate efficiently. The settlement terms were generous. The Connecticut house equity, a lump sum, her design firm assets returned in full. Rebecca slid the final settlement draft across her office desk one October afternoon. "This is good," she said. "Better than I expected." Claire felt something release in her chest. A long-held breath. Maybe this was nearly over. Maybe she could stop bracing for impact. She looked at the settlement figures, at the signature lines, at the date. 30 days until the final signing. She thought, 30 more days and then I am free. She thought, 30 more days and I can start building in the open instead of in secret. She allowed herself, carefully, to believe it. She was 4.5 months pregnant, and she thought she was almost safe. She was wrong. Her phone rang that evening, a number she recognized. She answered before she thought better of it. "I've been doing some thinking," Daniel said. His voice was calm. It was always calm. That was one of the things she had learned about him. The calmer his voice, the more dangerous the conversation. "My attorney prefers that you contact Rebecca directly. Sandra saw you," he said, "last week, at the OB clinic on Madison. She was walking to her yoga class." The cold moved through Claire so quickly she had to sit down. Sandra Harrington, Daniel's mother, the woman who had called Claire adequate at Thanksgiving dinner without any apparent awareness of the cruelty of the word, who attended yoga 3 mornings a week at a studio 2 blocks from the clinic where Claire had an appointment last Tuesday. "I don't know what you think you saw," Claire started. "Claire." His voice was still calm, still precise. I think you know exactly what I think I saw, and I think we should talk about it. Before this gets complicated." He hung up. Claire sat in Meg's living room with her phone in her hand and the cold spreading out from her chest, and Patterson, sensing something, jumping up onto the couch beside her and pressing his large gray body against her side. She called Rebecca. Rebecca picked up on the second ring. "He called me," Claire said. "He knows." A pause. Then, in exactly the tone of a woman who is already thinking 3 moves ahead. "What did he say? Exactly?" Claire told her. "Okay," Rebecca said. "This is manageable. But tomorrow morning, he files a motion to pause the proceedings. I want you prepared for that. Are you at Meg's? Yes? Stay there tonight. Don't contact him. Don't respond if he calls again. Document the call. Time, duration, everything he said as closely as you can remember it. I'll see you at 9 tomorrow." Claire put the phone down. Patterson pushed his head under her hand. She scratched his ears mechanically and stared at the far wall and thought about how briefly she had believed she was almost safe. The previous OB had retired. Rebecca had suggested switching clinics anyway, for privacy reasons, given the situation. The new clinic was on the Upper West Side, small and quiet, the kind of medical practice that felt designed to be unremarkable from the outside. The name on the door was Whitfield Women's Health, which Claire had found by way of a recommendation from Rebecca's paralegal, who described the doctor as professional and thorough and volunteered without being asked, genuinely kind. Claire was 5 months pregnant and in the middle of a legal crisis when she walked in for the first time. Meg had insisted on coming. She sat in the waiting room with a coffee and a magazine and a tote bag containing, among other things, a granola bar for Claire, a charger, and what she described as general supportive items, whose exact nature she declined to specify. The nurse called Claire's name. She had registered under Cortez this time, not Bennett, not Harrington, and led her to exam room 2. Dr. James Whitfield was reviewing her intake form when she entered. He was tall, taller than she expected somehow, with dark hair that needed cutting and the specific kind of tiredness that settles around the eyes of people who work overnight shifts regularly. He had a small scar above his left eyebrow that looked like it had a history. He looked up when she came in. His expression was professional and attentive. "Ms. Cortez," he said, "I'm Dr. Whitfield. It's good to meet you. I've reviewed what came over from your previous practice." He set the tablet down. "You're 22 weeks. How are you feeling?" "Fine," Claire said automatically. He looked at her with the calm patience of someone who had heard fine used as a shield many times. "Physically," he said, "some fatigue, some lower back discomfort around week 18 that's mostly resolved. Any spotting?" "No." "Appetite?" "Good, mostly. Better than the first trimester." "Good." He picked up the tablet again, made a note. "And outside the physical, you've noted elevated stress levels on your intake form." "I'm in the middle of a divorce." "Ah." He said it with a matter-of-factness that she appreciated. No performance of sympathy, no uncomfortable pause, just acknowledgement. "That's significant. Stress cortisol in pregnancy can affect..." "Dr. Whitfield." He looked up. "Can we talk about the baby first? The rest of it, I can't control. The baby I'm doing everything right for." He considered this for a moment. Then something in his expression shifted. Not unprofessional, not familiar, just human. "Fair enough," he said. "Let's talk about the baby." The exam was thorough. He explained each step before doing it, which she appreciated. He used clear language, not either condescendingly simplified nor unnecessarily technical. When the heartbeat came through on the monitor, strong, fast, absolutely certain of itself, he watched her face instead of the screen. "Strong," he said. "Excellent positioning, measuring right on track." Claire felt the tears before she could stop them. Not dramatic tears, just the specific overflow that happened sometimes when something was genuinely okay after a long period of things not being okay. "Sorry," she said. "Don't apologize." He handed her a tissue with the ease of someone who kept them accessible for this exact reason. "You're doing well. You're doing everything right. That counts for a great deal." After the exam, when she was dressed again and he was making notes, he paused. "Can I ask you something? You don't have to answer." "You can ask. Your chart says Harrington as a former name. Your insurance still runs through a joint account under that name, which is why I noticed it." He was careful, precise. "You're registered here as Cortez. You came in alone to your first appointment at a new clinic during what sounds like a difficult, legal situation." He looked at her directly. "Is everything okay? Are you safe?" The question was so simple and so direct and so unexpectedly focused on her well-being rather than her status or her situation that she was briefly unable to speak. "I'm safe," she said finally. "He's not. It's not that kind of situation. He's just not a good person, and I'm making sure I'm clear of him before the baby comes." Dr. Whitfield nodded. He did not offer unsolicited opinions. He did not express surprise or pity or the particular kind of well-meaning intrusion that people sometimes offered in these situations. "Good," he said. "That's the right priority." He handed her the appointment card for her next visit. "I'll see you in 4 weeks. Call the after-hours line anytime if something concerns you in the interim. That's what it's for." She walked out to the waiting room where Meg was sitting with her magazine. Meg looked up, read Claire's face. "Good," Meg said. "Good," Claire said. "The baby is good." "And the doctor?" "Professional, thorough, kind." Meg's eyes sharpened slightly. "Kind how?" "Kind in a normal, medical, professional way, Meg." "Mm-hmm." Meg stood, collected her tote bag. "What does he look like?" "He's my doctor." "I didn't ask for a professional assessment. I asked what he looks like." Claire held the door open. "He has a scar above his left eyebrow." Meg walked through. "Interesting," she said, in a tone that suggested she was storing this information. That evening, while Claire was trying to read a book and failing because the words kept sliding past her without registering, Meg appeared in the doorway of her room with her phone. "Health grades?" Meg said. 4.9 stars, 243 reviews, multiple mentions of his bedside manner. Also, she turned the phone to show a photo from a community event listing. "He coaches youth baseball on weekends." Claire looked at the photo. Dr. Whitfield, in a t-shirt rather than a white coat, crouching down to talk to a kid in a baseball cap. "He coaches youth baseball," Meg said, with the gravity of someone making an important announcement. "That is the human equivalent of a golden retriever, Claire. Just saying." "He's my doctor," Claire said. "He's your doctor right now," Meg said, and disappeared back into the hallway. Patterson jumped onto the bed beside Claire, sat on her book, and regarded her with his flat, yellow stare. "Don't," Claire told him. He blinked once, slowly, which she had learned meant nothing in particular, but felt like judgment. The legal motion arrived on a Friday. Daniel's attorneys, working from the leverage of Sandra's sighting and the documented pregnancy, filed for emergency review of the settlement terms. The argument was carefully constructed. Claire had concealed a pregnancy that materially affected the settlement, potentially constituting fraud. The motion requested the proceedings be paused pending full disclosure and renegotiation. Rebecca read it in her office on Saturday morning. Claire could tell the nature of Rebecca's anger by how calm she sounded on the phone. "It won't succeed," Rebecca said. "But it will cost us time." "How much time?" "Weeks, possibly months. His goal isn't to win the motion. His goal is to delay long enough that the pregnancy itself becomes a complicating factor in the proceedings." Claire sat with this. So the baby being born potentially delays the final divorce. Potentially, yes. She had been 6 months pregnant when the motion was filed. By the time it worked its way through the system, she would be further along. Daniel knew this. His attorneys knew this. This was a map, not a mistake. "What do we do?" Claire said. "We fight it," Rebecca said. "And we document everything. The direct phone call he made, that goes in the file. Any contact that bypasses attorney channels is itself a violation of the procedure agreement. He's giving us ammunition while he thinks he's loading his own." Claire hung up. She sat in Meg's kitchen, her temporary kitchen, her kitchen in exile, and thought about how briefly she had believed the settlement was nearly final. She thought about the evening she'd spent looking at those figures, the deliberate relief she had allowed herself, the 30-day countdown she had started in her head. Patterson, who had been sitting on the kitchen table with the illegitimate confidence of a cat who knew he wasn't allowed there, but had calculated the odds of enforcement, looked at her with his yellow eyes. "I know," Claire said to him. He knocked her pen off the table. This was not helpful. The following Monday arrived with the specific quality that bad Mondays have: ordinary seeming from the outside, quietly catastrophic within. It began with a phone call from her biggest remaining design client. The Ashworth Group, a boutique hotel collection she had maintained a working relationship with through everything, was calling to cancel their contract. The account representative was apologetic and formal and offered very little explanation beyond the words, "instability concerns." After she hung up, she pulled up her laptop and searched. She found it within 3 minutes. A blind item on a Connecticut lifestyle blog. The kind of site that trafficked in the social movements of the wealthy under the thin cover of anonymity. The item described, in precise enough detail to be obviously specific, a designer in the middle of a contentious divorce from a prominent real estate developer, pregnant and living with a friend, whose professional reliability had come into question. Sandra Harrington moved in exactly these circles. She had been at 3 of the same events Claire had attended as Daniel's wife. She knew the people who ran blogs like this. She knew the people who read them. Claire closed the laptop. 40 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a notification from her bank. A hold on the joint account she and Daniel had not yet fully separated. "A clerical issue," the automated message said, "under review, expected to resolve within 48 business hours." 48 hours during which she could not access those funds. One Monday. 3 things: client lost, reputation publicly damaged, access to money frozen. She called Meg, who came home from work early. She called Rebecca, who was already aware of the blog post and had thoughts. She sat on the couch in Meg's living room while the November afternoon went gray outside the window and the city made its ordinary noise, and nothing about any of it felt ordinary. Patterson climbed onto her lap. He had never done this before. He was enormous and slightly too warm, and he pressed his head against her hand with a deliberateness that suggested he understood this was not a normal circumstance and had decided, reluctantly but firmly, that she required cat-based support. She did not cry. She had been bracing for impact for so long that when the impact came, there was nothing left to flinch with. She simply sat and held the cat and waited for the next thing. Meg came home at 4:30 with soup from the deli on the corner and sat beside her on the couch. Okay, Meg said. We take it one piece at a time. The client is gone. Yes, we find another client. My reputation is being attacked by a woman with nothing better to do than protect her terrible son's image. That's not your reputation, that's hers. The bank account resolves in 48 hours. Rebecca confirmed it is genuinely clerical, not strategic. Meg put the soup in front of her. Eat something. Claire looked at her. How are you this calm? I'm not calm, Meg said simply. I'm furious. But furious doesn't help you right now. Soup helps you right now. Claire ate the soup. Patterson remained on her lap with the weighted patience of an animal performing a specific function and aware of its importance. 2 weeks later, the court rejected Daniel's motion as overreach. Rebecca called it a clean, complete win. The settlement was back on track. The signing was rescheduled. Claire let herself breathe again. She should have known better by now. Rebecca called 3 days later with the news that Daniel's attorneys had escalated their strategy, now claiming not only concealment, but intentional fraud, that Claire had known about the pregnancy before initiating the divorce and had deliberately structured the proceedings to obscure it. It won't succeed, Rebecca said, again with the particular calm that meant she was professionally furious. But it means a hearing. How long? The pause. The baby will likely be here before this is resolved. Claire sat with her phone in her hand after the call ended and stared at the wall. Then Meg knocked on the door and said, "Come look at your phone," in a tone that meant something had happened. Tiffany Crane's Instagram, a story posted 2 hours ago. Daniel, Tiffany, a backyard, pink smoke, a cake being cut. The caption, "Our little miracle is on her way. So grateful." Tiffany was pregnant. The man who had called Claire defective for not conceiving had gotten his girlfriend pregnant within a year of leaving her. Claire handed Meg's phone back. "Okay," she said. "Claire, I know." She stood up, walked to the window, looked at the city below, which continued to exist with complete indifference to her situation. "I know." She stood there for a while. Then she went to her room and lay down and stared at the ceiling and let herself, quietly, in the privacy of the small room with the brick wall view, feel the full weight of everything that had happened. She felt it all. Then she got up, washed her face, and went to her next prenatal appointment. Dr. Whitfield was not supposed to be the person who pulled her back. That's not how she would have written it if someone had asked her earlier how this part of her story would go. She would have said, Meg pulled her back, or she pulled herself back, or time did it, the way time eventually does. But it was a Tuesday morning in December at a routine 34-week checkup, and it was the way he set down his tablet and said, simply, "What's going on outside this office?" She had been deflecting this question for 3 appointments now. She was good at deflecting. She had spent 4 years becoming very skilled at presenting a composed surface to the world, while the interior required significantly more maintenance. "My blood pressure is elevated," she said before he could. "I know. I saw the reading. Not dangerously, but enough that I want to understand the context. I'm fine." He was quiet for a beat. "The baby is perfect," he said. "Strong heartbeat, ideal positioning, measuring exactly on track. She's thriving." She. The pronoun caught her, as it always did. She had known the gender for months. She had chosen the name weeks ago, but hearing someone else say she was still, every time, an unexpected impact. "Her mother," he continued, "is another matter. Dr. Whitfield, I'm not asking for details. I'm asking as a medical professional who needs to understand why your stress indicators are elevated at a point in the pregnancy where they should be decreasing." He folded his hands on the desk, not impatient, not pressuring, just present. "You don't have to tell me anything. But if there's something I can help with, even just by knowing, that's useful." Claire looked at him, at the tired eyes and the scar and the particular kind of steadiness he had, which she had identified by now as something that came from having seen difficult things and chosen to stay anyway rather than from never having seen them at all. "The divorce is still not finalized," she said. "He found out about the pregnancy, and he's been using the courts to delay and complicate everything. Last week, his attorneys filed a fraud claim. It won't succeed, but it means more time, and possibly the baby arrives before the divorce is final." She stopped. That was more than she had told anyone except Meg and Rebecca. Dr. Whitfield listened without interrupting. "That's a significant amount to carry," he said when she stopped. "It is. And you're carrying it well. That doesn't mean you have to carry it alone." She looked away, out the window, the city beyond the glass, going about its ordinary December. "I'm not alone," she said. "I have Meg." "Meg is good," he said, in a tone that suggested he had heard enough about Meg over the past months to have a general understanding of her character. "But support comes in different configurations." He paused. "I'm going to ask you something, and you have every right to tell me it's inappropriate, and I'll never mention it again." She looked back at him. "Would you want to have dinner sometime, not as your doctor, as someone who would genuinely like to know you outside of this office?" The room was very quiet. She thought about what she was, 8 months pregnant, not yet divorced, living in her best friend's second bedroom with a cat who sat on her legal documents. She thought about the specific improbability of this moment. She thought about Daniel and about the 4 years of carefully managed smallness, and about the kitchen floor, and about the certainty she had felt in Meg's bathroom looking at 5 positive pregnancy tests. "Yes," she said, "I'd like that." He smiled, genuinely, the same way he had that first appointment, not performed. "Good," he said. "Somewhere with comfortable seating. I'm aware of the 3rd trimester logistics." She laughed. It came out, right this time, clean. When she walked out to the waiting room, Meg was sitting with her magazine. She looked up and read Claire's face with the accuracy of 10 years of friendship. "What happened?" Meg said. "He asked me to dinner." Meg's magazine hit the floor. She looked at it, back at Claire, back at the magazine. "Patterson," she said quietly, to the cat who was not present, "she's going to be okay." The call came from Rebecca in the 2nd week of January. Claire was at her drafting table. She had set up a small workspace in Meg's living room, had taken on a modest commission through a former colleague, the first design work she had done in years that felt like hers rather than a performance of adequacy. The work helped, the tactile certainty of it, line and proportion, and the logic of space. "Tiffany Crane called my office," Rebecca said. Claire set down her pencil. "She asked to come in, not adversarially. She said she has information that she believes you need to have." A pause. "I told her I would relay the message, and you would decide." "What kind of information?" "She didn't specify to me, but she used the word deceived, about herself." Claire was quiet for a moment. "Set the meeting," she said. Tiffany Crane arrived at Rebecca's office the following Thursday. She was tall and blonde and dressed simply, not the curated performance of her Instagram presence, just a person in a good coat who looked like she had been making difficult decisions recently. She sat across from Claire and Rebecca and folded her hands on the table. "I believed things about you that weren't true," she said. She was direct. Claire had expected deflection or apology. The directness was unexpected, and she respected it. "He told me you were unstable, that you'd manufactured the fertility crisis for attention and sympathy, that the pregnancy, when I saw the news, was a manipulation." "And now?" Claire said. Tiffany reached into her bag and placed a folder on the table. I went looking for the actual timeline. When I started finding things that didn't match what he'd told me, I went further. She pushed the folder toward Rebecca. These are screenshots. Text messages between Daniel and a friend of his. I won't say how I accessed them. He sent them during your last IVF round. Rebecca opened the folder. Claire watched Rebecca's face. Rebecca's face did not change. Rebecca's face never changed. But her stillness deepened by a degree. She turned the folder to face Claire. The text messages were dated during the months of the last IVF treatment cycle. The cycle during which Daniel had attended appointments, held Claire's hand, asked the right questions. The cycle that failed while Claire sat at the kitchen island, unable to breathe. In the text, Daniel wrote to his friend, "If this fertility thing doesn't resolve by spring, I'm pulling the trigger. I've already met someone. Claire just doesn't know she's already been replaced." He had been planning to leave before the last IVF attempt. He had known during the appointments, during the hand-holding, during the questions, that he was leaving. He had let her go through it. All of it, already knowing. "Why are you giving us this?" Claire said. Tiffany was quiet for a moment. "Because he's been messaging his college ex-girlfriend for the past 2 months. And because I found out that the way he treated you is the way he treats people." She looked at Claire directly. "And because I'm pregnant, and he knows, and I needed to understand what kind of person I'm dealing with for the next 18 years. The room was quiet. Rebecca closed the folder. "These screenshots, are you willing to make up a sworn statement confirming their authenticity?" "Yes," Tiffany said. Claire looked at the woman across the table from her. The woman she had imagined as the villain in her story, because it was easier to have a simple villain. The reality was more complicated and somehow more human. "Thank you," Claire said. Tiffany nodded. "I'm sorry I didn't ask more questions earlier." After Tiffany left, Meg, who had been waiting in the lobby and had witnessed Tiffany's exit, called Claire immediately. "Was that her?" Meg said. "Yes." "And?" Claire told her. Silence. "I'm sending her a fruit basket," Meg said finally. "Don't try to stop me. I'm not going to stop you." Full basket, premium, seasonal fruits. Another pause. "Actually, given what those screenshots mean for the settlement, it might need to be a charcuterie board." Meg. "I'm just saying." Proportional response. With Tiffany's evidence, Rebecca filed a countermotion. The fraud claim against Claire collapsed within 10 days. The settlement terms were reinstated with additions. Daniel's deliberate concealment of his exit planning during the IVF period had relevance to the equitable distribution argument that Rebecca had been building quietly for months. The signing was scheduled, November, the 34th floor, the mahogany table. Claire in her charcoal blazer over a white dress. 8 months pregnant. She walked in and did not hide. The room in the aftermath of Claire's statement was the specific silence of people recalibrating. Daniel stared at her, not with anger. The anger came later. In this moment, there was something raw. The man who had called her defective was looking at the proof that he had been wrong and that the proof had a name, and the name was Nora. And Nora was real and present and kicking at that moment with her usual confident timing. His lead attorney attempted to speak. The words came out partial. Rebecca folded her hands on the table and waited. "She's mine," Daniel said finally. It wasn't a question. He had done the math, the same math everyone in the room had done. "Yes," Claire said. He stood up abruptly. The chair scraped. He walked to the window and stood there with his back to the room, looking out at Central Park, 34 floors below. His attorneys exchanged a glance. "I'd like 20 minutes," Daniel said, not turning around. Of course, Rebecca said. Claire remained at the table. She ate the granola bar Meg had put in her coat pocket. Because she was 8 months pregnant, and it had been 4 hours since breakfast, and she was not going to let the drama of the moment interfere with basic nutrition. Rebecca saw this and did not comment, which was one of the things Claire appreciated most about her. Daniel's attorneys went with him to a side room. After exactly 19 minutes, he came back. He sat down across from Claire, not at the head of the table, across from her, the same level. I was wrong, he said. His voice came out like it cost something, not performed. She knew his performances. This was the thing underneath the performance. I said things that were cruel and untrue. I let you go through things you shouldn't have gone through alone. I made decisions I shouldn't have made, and I let you believe things that served me while they hurt you. He stopped. I know saying that doesn't fix it. No, Claire said. It doesn't. I want to be part of her life. That will be her choice when she's old enough to make it. Until then, you follow the agreement. You show up when you say you'll show up. You don't involve attorneys in her childhood. You don't use her as a point in a negotiation. Daniel nodded. And Tiffany? He said. What about her? What do I... She gave you those messages. She told the truth, Claire said. You should try it. It's difficult at first, but it becomes easier. Something flickered across his face. She thought, briefly, it might have been the beginning of a real expression. Then he picked up the pen. He signed. Rebecca collected the papers. Claire stood, gathered her coat, and walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the frame, not for effect. She stopped because she wanted to say something true. I hope you figure out how to be a person who doesn't do this to people, she said to Daniel, without turning around. Not for me, for Nora. She's going to have your jawline, and she should also have a father she can respect. She walked out. The elevator, the lobby, the November street. She stood on the sidewalk outside the building and put both hands on her abdomen and felt Nora move. The baby's usual morning activity arriving slightly late due to circumstances. Her phone buzzed. Meg. Patterson and I are at the coffee shop on 53rd. Get in a cab. I have a full table of food. Claire smiled. She got in a cab. Nora arrived 23 days later on a Thursday morning in early December during a snowfall. The quiet kind that makes the city go soft and slow. James was not on call. He came in anyway. 14 hours of labor. He stayed through all of it, which was not required of him, and which she did not ask for, and which she was more grateful for than she would know how to say for a long time. He stood near the window during the private moments. He was steady during the difficult hours. When she said, at hour 9, that she wasn't sure she could do this, he said, You've been doing harder things for 2 years. This is different, but it is not harder. She believed him. It helped. At 6:12 in the morning, Nora Claire Bennett arrived. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, full head of dark hair, a voice that announced her presence to the entire maternity ward with zero ambiguity. The nurse placed her on Claire's chest, and Claire looked down at her daughter and felt the specific and overwhelming clarity of a moment that makes sense of everything before it. Hi, Nora, she said. Her voice was wrecked. She didn't care. I've been building toward you for a long time. James stood by the window, giving her the moment. Then quietly, she looks like she already has opinions. She absolutely does, Claire said. Daniel came to the hospital on the second day. He came with a large stuffed bear and a complicated expression. He stopped when he saw James sitting in the chair beside Claire's bed looking entirely at home. He's here because I want him here, Claire said, before Daniel could speak. If you want to meet your daughter, you're welcome. But you leave the expression at the door. Daniel's jaw worked. Then he set down the bear and came to the bedside. When he held Nora, carefully, with the uncertain hands of someone holding a newborn for the first time, something changed in his face. It was not performed. It was not strategic. It was simply a man looking at his daughter for the first time and understanding, perhaps for the first time in his adult life, that some things exist entirely outside of what you can control or leverage or plan. "She looks like you," he said quietly, around the eyes. "Yes," Claire said. "I'm sorry, Elena." He caught himself. "Claire, I'm sorry." "I know." She meant it. Not absolution, just acknowledgement. "You can be a good father. That's separate from everything else. It's not too late for that." He nodded. He held Nora for 7 more minutes. Then he put her back gently, said he would be in touch through Rebecca about the visitation schedule, and left. James watched from his chair. "That was generous," he said, after the door closed. "She deserves a father," Claire said, looking at Nora. "Even an imperfect one. Even him." Vermont in February is cold in a way that is honest about itself. Not the ambient cold of a city, which is managed and mediated by millions of people sharing heat. Vermont cold is direct. It comes in off the mountains and states its intentions clearly, and you dress accordingly and make peace with it, or you leave. Claire had made peace with it. The apartment was on the 2nd floor of a 3-unit building in a small town 40 minutes north of Burlington. It had a window in the kitchen that faced east, which meant she had morning light at her drawing table. The 2nd bedroom was sage green, a soft, certain color she had mixed herself, testing 5 samples before she found the one that felt right. Nora was 6 weeks old and sleeping with the determined commitment of a person who had decided rest was the correct use of time. Claire was at her drawing table. The Hendersons, a young couple, who had bought a farmhouse on 12 acres outside of town, needed help with the interior. They had the bones of something beautiful and no idea how to make it livable. She had taken the commission the week after Nora was born, which Meg had called insane and which Claire had called necessary. She needed to make something. She needed to use her hands for building instead of defending. Her pencil moved across the paper. The kitchen layout. The way the windows faced west and the evening light would pour through and hit the original pine floors, and if they got the table placement right, every dinner would happen in gold. Her phone buzzed. A text from James. "Farmer's market opens early today. Nora seems like she'd have opinions about the cheese selection. Bringing coffee, if acceptable." She looked at the text. She looked at the morning light coming through the kitchen window. She looked at the sage green door of Nora's room, visible from where she sat. She typed back, "Acceptable. Get the dark roast." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, obviously. She set the phone down and picked up her pencil and thought about the past year and a half. Not with the grinding, exhausted processing of someone still in the middle of it, but with the particular clarity of someone who has come out the other side and can see the shape of the path. The kitchen floor in Greenwich. The receipt from Aurelius. Meg's 2nd bedroom, Patterson sitting on the legal documents, Walt and his disappointed uncle energy, Rebecca and her professional fury and her steady 3 moves ahead. The signing table. Daniel's face when he understood what was under the coat. The way his voice changed when he said her name. Nora. 6:12 in the morning. The quiet snowfall. James in the chair by the window. Meg's fruit basket for Tiffany, which had been upgraded twice and had apparently been received with genuine appreciation. The phone call from Meg 4 weeks ago, delivered with the controlled excitement of someone sitting on information they had been waiting to deliver. "Tiffany and Daniel split," Meg had said. "I know. She posted. That's not the whole story. Her pregnancy, Claire." A pause for effect. Meg was very good at pauses for effect. It wasn't a viable pregnancy. She announced too early. By the time she knew for certain, the relationship was already falling apart. Claire had been quiet. He has one child, Meg said, in the world. It's Nora. The man who called you defective has one child, and her name is Nora, and you are raising her. Claire had sat with this for a while. The fruit basket for Tiffany, she said finally. Did you send it? I sent a charcuterie board, premium meats, artisanal cheeses. She sent a thank you note. The visitation schedule with Daniel was working. Imperfectly, as these things always do, but working. He came every other weekend. He arrived on time, which she had not entirely expected. He did not bring lawyers or arguments or attempts to relitigate anything. He brought himself, a version of himself that was still Daniel, still recognizably the man she had married, but quieter somehow, like a person who had looked directly at something and been changed by it. The last visit, he had held Nora for an hour while Claire designed in the next room. She could hear him talking to the baby in a low voice. She didn't listen to the words, they weren't hers to hear. But the tone was right, patient, present. She thought, maybe some people need to lose everything they thought they wanted before they can figure out what they actually are. She didn't know if that was true for Daniel specifically, but she allowed the possibility. James came in at 9:10 with 2 coffees and the particular organized efficiency of someone who had learned to move through other people's spaces without disrupting them. He had been doing this for 2 months. The farmers' markets, the dinners, the Sundays that had begun to feel like their own kind of ritual. He was not a simple man. She had learned that. He had a quietness that came from loss. His father, when he was in residency, sudden and with no warning. And a stubbornness about his work that she respected and sometimes argued with and was always glad of. He was not perfect. He forgot to respond to texts when he was thinking about something else. He had strong opinions about coffee that she found slightly excessive. He took on too many overnight shifts and then was tired in the particular way of someone who would not admit they were tired. He was real. That was what mattered. He was completely, uncomplicatedly real. He set her coffee on the corner of the drawing table, away from the papers. "How's the farmhouse?" he said, looking at the plans. "The kitchen is almost right. The windows are the key." He looked at the drawing with genuine interest. He always did. He never performed interest in her work. He simply had it. The evening light. Every dinner in gold, if I get the table placement right. "Then get it right," he said, and went to check on Nora. She heard him in the next room, his voice low, talking to the baby the way he always did. Like she was a person who would understand the words when she was ready, and until then, deserved the conversation anyway. Claire looked at her drawing, at the line she was building, at the life taking shape room by room, choice by choice. She thought about the woman who had walked into that law office, 8 months pregnant with the coat buttoned all the way up, who had stood outside conference room 3 and put her hand on her abdomen and said, "We're almost through it." She had been right. They were almost through it. And then they were all the way through it. And then they were here. She picked up her pencil. She thought, this is what strength actually looks like. Not the absence of fear, not the absence of loss, not never hitting the floor. Strength looks like hitting the floor, staying there long enough to feel the full weight of what happened, and then getting up. Getting up and calling your lawyer, and calling your best friend, and going to the appointment, and signing your name, and walking out into the November street, and calling a cab, and going to eat the food that someone who loves you put on the table. Strength looks like choosing, when you have been given every reason not to let someone in again, to trust again, not blindly, not without evidence, But genuinely, it looks like a name on a settlement document. It looks like a shade of sage green that took 5 tries to get right. It looks like a baby who kicks in the mornings and has opinions about cheese markets at 6 weeks old. It looks like this. Exactly this. James came back to the doorway of the kitchen. "She's awake," he said. "She's doing the thing where she looks at the ceiling like it owes her money." Claire set down her pencil and stood up. "That's a Harrington expression," she said. "I've decided to find it funny." "Good call." She walked past him to Nora's room, picked up her daughter from the crib, 7 pounds 4 ounces of absolute certainty, dark hair, her own eyes, and held her against her chest and looked at the February morning through the window. Snow on the mountains, the clean, honest cold, the coffee going warm on her drawing table, James in the kitchen doorway, Nora in her arms. She had walked into a conference room in November with the truth hidden under her coat, and she had let it out at the right moment, on her own terms, and she had signed her name and walked out into the city and called a cab and not looked back. She had not looked back. Her future was in this room, in the next room, in the morning light and the drawing table and the child in her arms and the man who brought dark roast without being asked and coached youth baseball on weekends and sat in a hospital chair for 14 hours because he wanted to. This was the life she had built from the wreckage, room by room, line by line, choice by choice. It was not the life she had planned when she walked down the aisle at 30 toward a man who smiled like a safe place. It was better. It was hers. Every inch of it was hers. She had earned it. If this story stayed with you, if you have ever been told you were not enough or too much, or that your worth was measured by what you could give someone else, I want you to hear this. That was never the truth about you. That was the truth about them. Claire's story is not uncommon. What is uncommon is the ending. And the ending is possible for anyone willing to do the hardest thing, choose themselves, even when everything around them suggests they aren't worth choosing. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Leave a comment telling me which moment in this story hit the hardest for you. And share this with someone today who needs to hear it. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one. Closing disclaimer: this content was manually researched, developed, and edited by our team with the intention of bringing meaningful stories and real emotional value to every person who listens. Every word was chosen with care for you,